That, I think, will be the underlying theory. Because the reality of what you were playing before, when you go to, if you have the melody, just like that simple basis of the Mother Nature's Son theme, like why this left-hand note would start on the 5, go to the 6, and then go to the flat 6, and go back to the 5. The overarching reason why that flat 6 is powerful there comes from several different directions. And I'm going to explain this just right now as an example, okay? There's the tritone. There's the relation of the tritone to in tension release. Did you watch my video on the tritone by chance? I put it up like a couple weeks ago.
I think so.
So if you just like general quick overview of it, 5 to 1, right? You know the 5 to 1 thing. It's like 5 is tension, 1 is release. Like you have G to C, okay? The notes that are important in the G are the 3 and the dominant 7. Tell me if I lose you at any point, by the way, because I'll slow down or backtrack, because it's important you understand everything I'm saying. Okay, so this is your 5, that's G. You're playing the 3 and you're playing the 7. These are your most important notes, are the 3 and the 7, with the G being
want to resolve.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's got that pulling sound.
Yeah, it has the pulling sound, and the reason it has the pulling sound is because it's the most dissonant interval that you can have other than the minor 2. So this is the minor 2, but that doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere that is like tension release. This is tension, and it's called a tritone because there are 3 whole steps. 1, 2, 3. Right? It's three tones away. The 7 resolves up to the 1, and the 4 resolves down to the 3. And you hear that if you just play around with it. Sorry, text messages. I have it on airplane mode.
It's fine.
But so you can see my hands, I have to. Oh wait, there, it went away. No, it didn't go away. That might keep happening.
Well, they got you on a group text now. You're gonna be getting them every 10 seconds.
I know. I don't know how to turn that off. Well, okay. You can kind of see, right? You can still see my hands, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So like, you're in C and you're improvising. It's like very basic improvisation is what I'm doing. It's not going to sound great, but you play that. It's got to go here. Like, your ear is pulling it down to the 3. If you do the 7, your ear is pulling it up to the 1, because it's a tritone that resolves to the 1 and the 3 of the root.
Yeah.
So, like, you hear that in Keith Jarrett's solos also. He'll play like this, which is the 7 of the 5, and then play something that then goes and encloses it to the 3, like I'm sure you recognize that sound. Like, it's a melodic diversion away from this note and then back to where it's going to resolve.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a general gist of how you compose in the first place. You have a tension point, and then you diverge. Either you go to its release, which is boring, or you diverge further. And then go back to the release. And you can do that in so many, like... And then you go back, you eventually get to your 1 point, if you want to. Sometimes you don't. Miles Davis didn't often actually go to the resolution. He would just play all the tension points and then end it, which is another incredible skill to be able to do that effectively. So anyway, that's the 7 and the 3 and the 7 of the 5 leading is a tritone, leads to the 1 and the 3. If you take that and you flip it on its head, which is something that Bach did a long time ago that you don't hear about now, and I did a video on it. I called it inverse harmony or dark harmony. People call it.
I tried watching that and I was like, I'm missing something here.
Okay, so
like, there's something I don't get.
It's cool. It's a complicated thing that nobody talks about now because it's too complicated for most people to really get. But to have a full understanding of why music works in like half of it, the half that's a little bit harder to understand from an intellectual standpoint, you need to have some grasp of it. So you'll be able to. You're obviously a smart guy, and I'm sure that we'll be able to like figure out a way to explain it to you. And let's just go over it in a very overarching way now, which is that if you look at the major scale, it's a set of intervals, right? All right, I think they've stopped messaging. I can probably get rid of that message now. Okay. It's a set of intervals. There's a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and a half step. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, the tritone lies in a certain place. If you look at this as the 1 and you're going up, and you look at the tritone in that major scale, it's here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And its resolution, rather than going in a half step on the each of those two notes, it goes out a half step because you're dealing in octaves, so you can and this is exactly half of an octave. So you can either go in or you can go out. Because it's in this part of the scale right now that we're dealing with, it goes out to the 3 and the 1. Do you remember how when we were here, it's just speaking diatonically, do you know what diatonic means when I say that?
No.
Diatonic just refers to the notes of the major scale based on a single key. So, we're speaking diatonically about C right now, so I'm going to say this is the 7. Because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right?
Yeah.
And then 1, 2, 3. So the 7 and the 3. I'm sorry, 7 and the 4.
7.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The 7 and the 4 go inwards to the 1 and the 3, right? Now, if you do the 7 and the 4, but you take the 7, you do this 7, because it's still 7, right? Up here.
It goes out.
It goes out. And so that's like... That's the like resolution of that. And that, well, so you were just going the other way when you played what you just played. You went to D, right?
Yeah, because I was thinking about, because that, that's obviously...
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, okay, well, at least in that song, Mother Nature's Son, I was like, okay, well, you get that... Like,
yeah.
I'm thinking, like, okay, how the hell does that work?
I know exactly what you're referring to. Okay, so check this out. What you just did in your mind was you flipped your reference point. You took what I'm talking about is C as a reference point and G as the dominant 7. So this tritone goes to here to resolve to the 1, and we're talking about a 5-1. What you did was you saw the G, which is, if you look at it just isolated on the piano as these specific notes, it could be in relation to any reference point. And if you talk about it in reference point to D, then it's actually the 4, it's not the 5. Because G to D, if I was explaining everything I just explained to you in D, I would say this is your 1, D is your 1, and you have your major scale. This is your diatonic scale in D, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So if you have your tritone in D, diatonically it's going to be the 4 and the 7. And that's going to lead to the 3 and the 1. Or the 7 and the 4 up here, leading to the 3 and the 1 there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so now if you go to G, and you're talking diatonically in D, this is your 4, which is called a plagal cadence. That's a reference to the G being the subdominant rather than the dominant. And the reason it's called the subdominant is because it's down a fifth instead of up a fifth. So you have D, your dominant is an A, 7, and it leads to the D, right? Your subdominant goes the other direction and then goes up. It goes this way a fifth and back up to the 1, and then the dominant goes this way a fifth and back down to the 1. Does that make sense? If I play it without voice leading, it's 5 to the 1, which is the dominant to the tonic. This is called the tonic in musical terms, or the subdominant to the tonic. And the subdominant doesn't really lead, it doesn't pull you back to the tonic. It's just like sort of a continuation of a sound. It's not like a pulling you in a certain direction. Like that's... It sounds very different than... It's a much more like whatever sort of thing. However, that's what gets us into the interesting part of why that one note works that you played. Because I'm gonna go back to C now, okay? So you have your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Your tritone leading to the tonic. Now, if you flip that upside down on its head, then if you take that, like the intervals here, going from the 1 to the 1, and you do those same intervals going down, it is, and then you start on a note where, well, okay, this is where the explanation could go in one of two directions. I'm going to go in the way that it will be easiest to, I think, absorb, which is if I start here, which doesn't really matter that it doesn't matter that it's the fifth of C. Just, I'm starting on this note, which is a G, and I'm going to do that same interval pattern going in this direction. You go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And now, if this is your 1, like this was your 1 going up. Now this is your 1 going down. So far, does that make sense? The direction I'm going with it?
It does, because I found that sometimes, like when I'm in C and I'm messing around with something, it's really easy to go into that key where you're...
Yeah, well that's C minor. You're just going from major to minor when you do that. We call it minor, but a minor is actually the same intervals as major, just flipped on its head.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
That I didn't realize.
So this is your, let's take a step back. This is your 1, you're going up. Those same exact intervals, you flip it over and base it on the G. You go down. So if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, that's a tritone, right? And then that resolves to this, which if you're just looking at it upside down, this is the 1 now and this is the 3. It'll take some practice to actually be able to see it that way. It's like putting on glasses that flip the world upside down. Eventually your brain adapts to see it that way.
I think that's why I was like, when I was watching the video on it, I was like, you know that feeling when you almost get something?
Yeah.
You're missing that like last inch and you're like, especially with music, where I'm like, I know I've heard this stuff before, and I know I've heard it be used, and I probably even transcribed something that worked that way. That was an excellent illustration of like why that works and how it works. But I couldn't connect the dots.
Totally.
So,
Well, have you connected these dots so far that I've described?
yeah, for the most part. I'm really glad you're going to be hosting this video, because I'm probably going to have to go back and listen to the last 10 minutes of it.
Okay, cool.
Sure.
Cool. So just the thing I need you to understand though is that the tritone here is based on seeing a mirror image of the tritone here, because this going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, you have the 4 and the 7 to the 3 and the 1, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm just going to base it here upside down. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So you have the 4 and the 7, and this is the 1, leading to the 3 and the 1. 4 and 7 to 3.
So when you're doing that, is that a blueprint for resolving something back to a minor key?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Because
that makes a little bit more sense to me when I put it. At least when I think about it that way, it's like, because when you were describing the tritone, you would go, that's great, but it doesn't resolve. And I remember you going into the video about this, how it's really hard to resolve that too. It's not the same. It doesn't have the same pull when you go to minor. But if you go to major, it does. But what you're describing now,
yeah, exactly. And so that's why, like, if you're in C, what would be the dominant? If you're like looking at G major to C major, what would be the dominant of that is actually looking in the other direction now, because it's a mirror image. So you have your 3 and your 7 there, but the 3 and the 7 relate to the 1 in the way that F minor with the major 6 in it relates to C minor. Now I know you're not going to understand that fully right now, because I've taken like 2 steps forward really quickly, and you don't have to understand that. But that's where if you're playing in a minor key, this is where the tritone is that is pulling you to this, which is if you're and it's based on F as your dominant, really. And there's a specific name for it, but I can't remember what you call it in a minor key. You might actually call it the subdominant, but it's been a long time since music theory class with the correct vocabulary and everything, so I don't actually remember. But it's playing F with this note and this note leading to C with this note, and and the pull that you get
interesting to me is we're talking about this only in this minor, but what I've noticed is, so you have this tritone that goes this, and then you have, but you also, it does the same thing as, it also can pull to,
play that again?
So it still has a pull.
Oh, well, yeah, you're modulating. You went to E flat, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's another, what you are pulling apart now is something that's going to open your mind up to how, to entire worlds of composition. What takes you from this tritone to this resolution in C minor, those are the same 2 notes that will take you from this tritone, which is, if you base it over the root being B flat, this becomes the dominant 7, the flat 7 of B flat, and this becomes a 3 of B flat, and then you resolve from the 5, which is B flat, to the 1, which is E flat. Let me repeat.
So I do a lot of that in my playing now. Like, that's something that motion is something I use a lot because it's maybe just because I'm used to it, and it's really easy to get back to that, to a major.
Well, that's what I was doing in G a second ago.
Was it?
Yeah, sorry, man. These stupid text messages, Jesus. So, what you're doing there is the same thing I was doing in C. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know it makes sense. What I was, it does make sense. What I was saying is it's weird how you did this. You did the reverse. How you can, or wait, no, now I'm doing something. Where you're only, what's weird to me about it is you were taking, and maybe, I don't know how clear it's coming through, but you were doing, right? Well, I'm not really doing anything except taking out the C. I don't know, maybe I'm just like geeking out because it's like, oh, there's another thing that I just kind of figured out. That's what I've been doing, and now it kind of has a name.
Well, that,
sort of.
Yeah, that what you have been doing.
Is that just how music works?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. That is how music works. Like that, what you're pulling apart now is a way to create a tension resolution from like that works in one key and retonicize it. You recontextualize it into another key, and that's what you hear in every single great composer, like from the beginning. Bach did it a million times in every single song, because the tritone resolving to the 1 and the 3, it can pull you in a ton of different directions without changing any of the actual notes of that you would be playing there. So what I just explained to you was the reverse harmony, like the upside down harmony, and how that works with, if you look at it from a right side up perspective, which is not really the accurate way to look at it, but it's the easiest way to look at it, and you look at it as F minor with the major 6, and this is your tritone with the 3 and the major 6 of F minor going to the 5 and the minor 3 of C minor, you can be improvising in that key. Recontextualize it with the same exact note. Now I'm going to C minor. Now I'm going to E flat major, and I'm doing the same tension resolution. And your ear hears the same tension resolution, but you hear the ground shift beneath you, and it's interesting and exciting for one to hear that. That's what makes it a cool composition.
It almost makes those two tones the pivot point.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It is, exactly. It's the fulcrum, and it can be the fulcrum in 8 different directions because you have because it's, so just forget about the minor for a second. We're just looking at the major, right? So we're looking at well, let's go back to C, actually. Okay? 4 and 7 to 1. Now, this 4 and 7 can actually be, like, let's see what other, what is, so okay, that tritone can be based on this root. C sharp. Now what is it? Now this is what was the 7 and the 3 of G now becomes the 3 and the 7 of C sharp. And then becomes the 1 and the 3 of F sharp. Let me go through that again to nail it.
I understand what you did and what you're doing.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out, as I'm hearing you and we're going through this, I'm trying to figure out a way to contextualize it so I can go, okay, this is how I would use it. I'm thinking about how would I put it in my Swiss Army knife of playing.
Well, let me show you.
Yeah,
let me show you. So you have goal notes, right? Here's a note. If you have, let's just say the most simple thing that we could do right now. Have your melodic theme, whatever, be just 7 to 1, right? So it's a little cheesy because it's so simple, but do you understand what I just did?
Yeah, kind of. I'll have to go back and watch the video because the Skype does not like pianos, apparently.
Oh.
Because it was warping a little bit. I can see where your hands are going, but I think the notes were skipping out. But that's fine.
Got
I'll
you.
go back. I'll rewatch it.
Okay.
And,
but even though you're going to do that, let me explain it a little bit of what I did, so you don't have to just guess. It's I was doing the 7 to the 1, and I repeated that. Now I played the same note, which is the 7 of G, but I recontextualized it and made it in the bass I played C sharp, and now it becomes the dominant 7 of C sharp, which is the 4 of F sharp. And then the 4 of F sharp actually resolves down instead of up. And if I do it again, and you look at it based on now F sharp is your diatonic scale that you're using. So that's a 4, and your root is the dominant 7 chord, which is the 5 chord, which is C sharp, resolving to the 1, which is F sharp. And then you bring it back up, play the same exact note, and recontextualize it to the beginning of what you were doing. And now it's the 3 of G7, which brings you back to C, to the 1.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's like 7 1 7 1 7 1 7 1. Now if you change the bass note, it's 4 3 4 3 4 3 4 3. Change the bass note again, back to 7 1. But that's because this tritone can go in this direction, or this tritone can go in this direction. And they're both resolving, but they're resolving to different keys.
Yeah.
Now, what that tritone can also do is be the resolution to a minor key. Like we were doing before, I showed you how a tritone can resolve to a major and also to a minor. If you look at it from a minor perspective, you have this note and this note resolving to this note and this note, right? That's like your bass line, that's what we were talking about this whole time, this tritone to the resolution. But if you look at it in a minor key, then you have to change the relative key that you're in your bass, in your left hand, and now it becomes a D with the minor 3 and the major 6. Do you remember me talking about that when I was in F minor?
Yeah, I think so.
Minor 3, major 6, leading to the 5 and the 3 of the minor. So now you have that same tension release contextualized in a completely different way.
I'm playing it in my head. What it's doing, I guess, is...
Yeah.
And it's not using both.
No,
it's still moving around it and taking it to that minor.
Yeah, exactly. It has if you're looking at it in the key of A minor, your 2 leads up to your 3. I hate describing it that way because that's not the reality of how it technically works. It's actually upside down, the same as it would be a major. So this would actually be the 4 leading to the 3 upside down if you based it on an upside down major starting on E, going downwards. So 1, 2, 3, and this would be your 4, 5, 6, 7 to the 3 and the 1. But it's hard to look at it that way until you've just like kind of nailed it into your brain that way by practicing it, doing like upside down scales and stuff, which is kind of crazy. So for now, we'll talk about it from the 2 to the 3 of A minor, based on the 4. Because that's the thing about music in general, is there are going to be a bunch of different ways to talk about many aspects of it, because the nature of it is beyond our explanation of it. There are mathematical reasons for things happening that we have then like broken apart and created vocabulary for, but it goes beyond that vocabulary in many different ways. So you can use different vocabulary to address a specific issue from lots of different angles. So I just try to pick the vocabulary that will be the most specific to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, do you have a little more time right now? Is this okay?
I have all the time in the world.
Okay, cool. So I want to keep going a little bit just to get to, because this will be so valuable for your ability to start learning the pieces you need to learn to walk down to the path to composing your own music, given the skill sets that you already have, because you can already play the piano and you already have time and you have harmony, but you don't know really what the harmony means yet. So, let's see here. So I want to take a few steps back because we covered some different very valuable pieces, but there's one piece that I'm directing towards, which is why in that Meldau thing, in Mother Nature's Son, you can go, or whatever that was, like, why that actually works, right? So I need to diverge a little bit from that to get back to that. So we're going back to C now, and we're looking at you have your major, and then you have the upside down version of that, which is so this tritone leading there. Now, if you wanted to diverge from the specificity of where this tritone leads by going from this upside down version of the dominant 7 to tonic, if you want to diverge from that, instead of going to a minor, you actually want to end in a major, you can do that because your ear hears still the direction, and even if you don't do a half step here to the minor and do a whole step to the major, your ear will still hear it. And it's a little bit of a stretch, so it gives you this interesting, like, unexpected feeling in a way, but it ends up in kind of a cool sound. Right?
I think it's a sound that a lot of times I'll be playing with and I won't know how to get there.
Say that again?
Mostly if I'm improvising something.
Wait, say that question again?
That wasn't so much a question, it was more of an observation. Is like sometimes that's a sound that I'll go for, but I don't know how to get to it all the time. Because what usually ends up happening when I play something is it's very rare I'll actually stick to an arrangement. I'll usually end up screwing around, or let's just say with Mother Nature's Son, for example, I have 10,000 different ways to play it. Is I'll keep, if I'm learning or I'm teaching myself something new with that, I'll keep messing around with it. And every so often I'll be like, oh, I really want to do something like that. Like I'll want to make a motion like that, but I won't understand how to do it. But when you talk about it, that's a sound that I hear a lot when I'm thinking about a change that I want to make. Nothing specific, but that's a change in tone that I hear a lot that I've never really been able to go, oh, that's how I would do it.
Totally. And that's, so now in this video you have the reasoning from that down to the it's like its actual root, like why that technically works in that way, and where it's slightly diverged from, because it's not the most specific, like, there's a mathematical reason that everything sounds the way it sounds, right? And there's a reason that tension releases, and it's math combined with history and some accidents of history that we then adopt. But the math behind it is the tritone to the resolution. At least there's more history behind that actually, but not stuff that we have to address. Like we can look at that as the starting point, the tritone to the resolution, and what we're doing here is diverging slightly from that. In future things that we do, we'll diverge a lot more from that. But right now, we're diverging a little bit by, instead of doing a half step, doing a whole step, and going from this, which is, I wish I actually remember the vocabulary for what you call this. You might just call it the subdominant, even though it's not a major. But it's the F minor with the major 6 going to the C major, and this leading to this, and this leading to this as your tension release notes. So there are several other important things that go with that, because that particular tendency can be flipped on its head and used in different ways, but we don't need to go into those right now, because what I want to eventually do is give you a well-rounded understanding of every facet of how tonality works on the piano, so then you can use that to create your own music. But for now, we'll have to do it in chunks, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a chunk of how that works. Now, if you take it up a whole step and you have D as your root, and you look at the same thing that we just did. Now, so you have your D major, right, and your tritone resolution. But if you flip it on its head, starting on the 5th of D major, which is A, and you go down, this is your tritone. So this is technically the upside down 7, and this is the upside down 4. And it would normally resolve to this, right? But instead you're resolving it to the major. This is going up a whole step, and this is still going down a half step. So now you have that sound. So when you do that, what you're essentially doing is you're implying you have your, there's one more layer that I have to explain about that, and then I'm going to come back to the end result. you have your 1 obviously there, and this is your 5, and this is your 3. A simple, the most basic notes. Stupid times. 1 second. Tell it to stop. Okay, so. Jesus. Whatever. That'll go away. Or it won't, but I'm just gonna ignore it. So your 5 and your 3 going to, this is your 6 and your minor 3, and it's a tritone, which is like taking you on a divergence in a different direction, right? Like this would normally resolve to this. It would be, it would resolve you to C. Or if, oh my gosh. These text messages. So this could resolve to C, or it could resolve to F sharp. But it doesn't. He's putting that in as like a deceptive, like this is going in a different direction. But then throws in, he takes you back immediately to the original direction that you were. He takes you back immediately to the original direction that you were going in, and plays this, which would be your 7 if you were upside down in the relative in the dark harmony of that same key, and then imply this is the actual 4, which it's coming from multiple directions at once, which is why it's hard to make a valid single explanation for a lot of the more complicated aspects of music. You have to look at it from multiple angles sometime at the same time. But this, if you were playing just like a normal 5-to-1 resolution, this would be your 4 and leading to the 3, right? And then your 7 would lead up to the 1. That makes sense, yeah? In D, it'd be, that's your dominant with the 7 and the 3 of the dominant to your tonic, to the 3 and the 1 of the tonic. That makes sense, yeah? Okay,
yeah.
So he's taking this aspect of that way of looking at it, and then this aspect of looking at it in the other way that we just explained, and using both of those as resolution points to take it to its original place of harmony. The other aspect of the dark harmony way of looking at this is implied in there, and he probably plays it sometimes too, which is, sorry, I'm playing the 2 there. I'm playing the E. Which, when you look at it just as that to that, you can be like, well, why do we need all that backstory behind it? Because it's super simple. It's just like actually diatonic, except for this one note, and then leading to the resolution going downwards. But the reason that your ear hears it in such a powerful way is because of the backstory that goes behind this note, this particular note, and how it leads from what you see as the flat 6 in D to the 5. And that has to do with how the dark harmony way of looking at it relates to bringing it back to the major. Because you could be... And we'll see it in other... Looking forward to the future, we're going to see that same thing in other ways of looking at that note. For example, you could see it as the flat 9 of the 5. I'm not going to explain that whole thing now, but I will in a later lesson.
Yeah.
But having an understanding of that is going to allow you to open up in a bunch of different directions using that particular tendency.
So if I wanted to practice messing around with tritones and getting a good handle on where they are and which way they open up and resolve, is there a good way to practice, aside from just going through the whole piano and going and doing that over and over? I have a really hard time just looking at things and going, oh, that's the tritone, it resolves to that, so I'm just going to do that in all the keys and I'll remember it. Do you ever have exercises or things that you do to help reinforce that? Because I find the way that I understand keys is usually I end up learning a song in a key, and then I understand how the key works. And or it's something I discover while I'm screwing around. I understand there's some sort of relation between two keys, and I just stumble into it.
Totally. So this is going to be a specific way of...
Without...
Sorry, go on. What were you going to say?
I don't even remember. I think it's a Skype delay that's screwing us up.
Oh, okay.
It's fine.
So what this is going to be is a way to practice harmonic recontextualization based on the tritone. I want you to pick a specific tritone and do this actually with every tritone that exists, which there are, I guess, 6 of them, right? Because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you're back to the original. So there are only 6 tritones that you could have. So start with one of them. This is the 4 and 7 of C, leading to the 3 and the 1 of C, right? And practice at the beginning. Don't even do any time. Just practice looking at where that tritone can go, and then use it musically. Okay? So what that looks like is you have these 2 notes of your tritone, and you can improvise with it. And make sure that in your mind you're always seeing this, the leading tone leading to where it rests. Okay? Practice looking at it from its relative minor perspective. So if you're in C, then you look at it from D being the first note. And then mess around with that for a little while, and then go to the next way it can be used, which is as a in its well, what would you call this exactly? If you're in C and you go a half step up, what's the best way to explain this? The other root that you'll be able to use with these same notes is a tritone away from the root that you're using in any of these keys. So C is your root right now. You change that key to F sharp, and now you have your 5 of F sharp. That make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. We'll have to mess with it a little bit.
Okay, so...
it's tricky when you're playing sometimes, because it seems like the connection is like crystal clear, and then you'll start playing, and it's like, it sounds like Charlie Brown's Parents. It's just like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like...
Sorry.
Like, I can kind of see what he's playing, and my brain's trying to fill it in like a blind spot, but it sounds so weird.
Okay, well, you'll see the video.
It is tricky to follow, because I don't... Like, when you said relative minor, I was like, well, I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I'm going to have to look at the keyboard, because I don't.
Yeah, totally. And as you do these exercises, those will fill in your mind, too.
Yeah.
So, So now this is your dominant, and this is the 4 and the 7 of the tonic going to the 3 and the 1 of the tonic. So you mess around with that, and then mess around with the relative minor of that, which then becomes A flat minor, and this is the 3 and the major 6 of A flat minor, to E flat minor, which is this is the 5 and the minor 3. So then you're going like. And those are the 4 different ways that the tritone can be used. And once you have those under your hands, mess with switching them around, swapping the roots, and then it'll be something like this. And then
basically take the tritone and just make every possible combination of things that work with the tritone.
Yes, every possible combination of tension resolution with that specific tritone, which there are 4 different tension resolution points that work. And the but then you can also, like, you can recontextualize even within the context of the recontextualization. So, like, be deceptive about it. You have you're on your 5, right? But then you can switch to the other way of using the tritone, which is going to the minor, the 5, the upside down 5 of the relative minor to the minor. So it could sound like this. Or it could sound like this. Or this. My bad. Yeah, there are a lot of, you can go in a lot of different directions. And I want you to get as fluid as possible with those directions that you can go. And if you get familiar enough with that, which that's going to take a lot of time for you to get really familiar with that and be able to do it in time eventually. Don't do time originally, just like look at it and understand it and be able to play it in all the different ways first. You'll have to spend a chunk of time being able to play it first, very, very slowly, just the basic notes, then spend a chunk of time being able to play it musically and use goal notes and diverge from those goal notes and back to it, and then spend a chunk of time being able to play it in time and use rhythm in the context of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm going to just write that down.
Yeah. It's just funny after watching so many videos that you've done where you're like, do it in time, do it in time, do it in time. And then I get you on Skype and you're like, don't worry about the time.
Well, the thing is, your time is great. And this is something that you're weak on. And this is something that's going to fill out a big part of your brain as far as your knowledge of music. So I want you to get this before you even try to focus on time with it, because the time doesn't matter in the context of this harmony.